We're going to be looking in 1 Kings chapter 17 in just a few minutes. As a pastor, I hear the following phrases all the time. Ever since I've been preaching, I've heard it. Many people will come to me and they would go, I would like to serve God. I really would. But, got that goat in there. I'm always but. Number one, I'm broke. Well, who isn't? My health is bad. Doesn't allow me to serve God. Heard that more than anything. I've got no resources. Don't even have a vehicle. I have no education. I have no abilities. And then here's one of my favorites. I have family problems. If you have a family, you got family problems. I've had people even say I have all kinds of personal problems like addictions that I'm fighting and dealing with, and when I get all of that stuff clear, I'm going to serve God. Don't work that way. My favorite is, I'm not worthy. I know what you're thinking over there, the joke. Then there are some people that just have kind of just given up. You've struggled and struggled, you've given up. What you may not understand is that you are in a better position to be used of God because of that. Yeah. I know a lot of people that have the world by the tail. Man, they got resources, they got talents, they got abilities, and Lord knows they got the energy, but they ain't doing nothing for God. Not a single thing. And that's probably one of the most grievous things of all, but here's the problem. From those that gave me those 8 excuses to the ones that seemingly have it all and don't do nothing, the number one problem, and listen carefully to me because this is the gospel truth, whether you like it or not, is you simply are not committed. You simply are not committed. Do you think for one moment that serving God is going to be a free ride? That it's going to be an easy journey? That as long as if you're supposed to be serving God, man, it makes everything just so easy? No, let me tell you something. You haven't fought a battle till you try to serve God. Amen. But you have got to be committed. You've got to be committed because the storms are going to come up, the problems are going to arise, and the devil's going to throw everything he's got. It looks like he's dumping a bucket over on us in these last few months. But you got to be committed or you're not going to do it. You're not going to get rid of these problems right here that after 2 or 3 weeks. You have to be in it for the long run with God. He was in it for the long run with you. And he still is. I'm going to give you an example of 2 people this morning that were committed. And they're probably the biggest 2 opposites that ever lived, and that is Elijah the prophet and a widow woman. Now in 1 Kings chapter 17, here God gives Elijah a prophecy and great power for this short while. Listen to this. Elijah the Tishbite, who was of the inhabitants of Gilead, said to King Ahab. King Ahab was one of the most wicked kings that ever lived. And because of the sins that he committed, his entire nation was suffering. And Elijah walks right up to the king and says this, As the Lord God of Israel liveth, before whom I stand, there shall not be dew nor rain these years, but according to my word. God allowed Elijah to shut off the rain for over 3 years in Israel. What amazing ability and power he gave him. And so that was a huge, victorious moment for the prophet Elijah. Let me warn you, every time God gives you one of those big mountaintop, powerful experiences, the devil will be waiting behind the door when you get home. I'm serious. Something stupid is going to happen that will throw you for a loop if you let it, and if you are not committed. But when those loops come and those disappointments come after these great victories, that's when you really need to be committed. That's when you really need to be strong, and you cannot afford to fold up. Look at the humbling thing that happened. Happened to Elijah several times. Here you think that he could command that the stones be made bread after that, but he couldn't. And God said, get out of here, where he was staying. Get thee hence and turn eastward and hide beside the brook named Cherith that is before Jordan. Now you need to go and hide, because I've got some other things I'm going to do with you later, but you can't strut around and live off of the excitement of that moment. Now it's time to humble yourself. He said, it shall be that you will drink of the brook. That's where you're going to get your water from. And I have commanded the ravens to feed you. If you've never seen a raven, it's like a great big crow. They're big black birds. There are a few of them around here. They're really intelligent. They're some of my favorite birds to study. He said, I've commanded the ravens to feed you. Here's a man that had that mountaintop experience, and then now he's going to get kind of humbled right here for a while, and God's going to show him that it's not him that all this is coming from, that it's all coming from God, and he's going to make him depend on God again for more than he ever has, and then he's going to give him another powerful experience, and then another humbling, and then another powerful experience. And so he commanded the ravens to feed him. So Elijah went and did according to the word of the Lord, for he went and dwelt by the brook Cherith that is before Jordan, and the ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning. Can you imagine the birds bringing you your food? What would they bring you? Do they fly over to McDonald's and get what's left in the parking lot and bring it to you? I guess today they would have. But they found bread and they found meat to bring him because God gave it to them. And the ravens brought him bread and flesh in the morning and bread and flesh in the evening, and he drank of the brook. What you need to understand, if you are truly committed to God and you obey him and you don't back up and you don't find an excuse why you can't, he will provide if he has to get the birds to feed you. He will. But remember that word commitment. I used to see a bumper sticker that went around and said, try Jesus. That's the most stupid thing I've ever heard. You don't try Jesus. Either you commit or you don't. It ain't no trying him. And it came to pass after a while that the brook dried up because there was no rain. And because there had been no rain in the land, and the word of the Lord came unto him this time saying, God is getting ready to ask Elijah to do the craziest thing that he had ever done in his ministry. And believe you me, Elijah done some crazy things. If you read, he's the most colorful prophet you can imagine. God allowed him to do mighty miracles through him. Now he's going to ask him to do almost the most impossible, crazy thing. But let me tell you something. You get committed to God, and he'll ask those things of you too. Things that you'll go, ain't no way in the world I can do it, Lord. Look around. I can't do it. No, 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 you don't say that. You just do it. And let him take care of the details. So the word of the Lord came to him again saying this. Listen to this. Arise and go to Zarephath, which belongs to Zidon, and dwell there. Behold, I have commanded a widow woman to take care of you. Oh my gosh, a widow woman. Does anybody understand the plight of a widow woman in the Old Testament? There was no government programs. There was no food stamps. There was no welfare. And I mean, I'm grateful that those things are available right now. Please don't misunderstand me. There was no plan B. There was no plan A. It was tough. And he said, and there was no rain, and there was a famine, and nobody had any food. And he said, go see a widow woman, not a prince or a king or a rich man or a businessman. He said, go see a widow. He said, I have commanded that widow to take care of you. And so we can look at the widow for a moment. Let's look at her for a moment. The widow could say, I'm broke. My health is bad. I've got no resources. I've got no education. I have no husband. I have no money. I have no food. I'm taking care of a child. I have no abilities. On and on and on and on. But this woman was committed to the Lord. And so it does not matter. I want you to clearly understand, it does not matter what your situation is. The commitment is what will count. That's how a marriage works when you want to kill each other in the evenings. When you have such a hot disagreement. But that commitment, because in the morning maybe you'll think a little clearer and agree with your wife. It's commitment. It's because you're committed to each other no matter whatever happens. And when you do that, you'll make it. But you got to be committed. I'm going to keep drilling that home. So he arose and he went to Zarephath. And when he came to the gate of the city, this is what he saw. There was the widow woman. She was gathering sticks. Not firewood, just sticks. And he called to her and said this, fetch me, I pray thee, a little water in a vessel, that I might drink. And so she turned to go get him the water. Evidently she knew who he was, and she knew what God had told her to do. And so now God's getting ready to put her to the test. I know that God did not tell the widow woman what she was going to have to deal with, and just how committed she would have to be to do God's bidding. He just commanded her to take care of him. She had no idea what he was going to ask of her. And so you've got to go into this relationship with God, not knowing what God is going to ask of you, but be willing to do it no matter what. And as she was going to fetch the water, he called to her and said, bring me, I pray thee, a morsel of bread in your hand. And then she made this statement to him, as the Lord thy God liveth, I have not a cake. That meant a biscuit. That meant a morsel of bread. She said, I don't even have that. She said, but I have a handful of meal in a barrel, and a little bit of oil in a cruse. And behold, I am gathering 2 sticks. That's all she needed to fix that. That I may go in and dress it for me and my son, that we may eat it and die. She saw her situation, and she realized that she had only enough flour and oil to make 1 biscuit. How would you like that to be your last meal? If it was made right, it would. If it was one of Mary's back there, it wouldn't be so bad. I've had her biscuits. They worth dying. They worth killing over. But this widow had some oil and flour, and she knew when she made that biscuit, there would be no more. That was going to be her and her son's last meal, because there was no rain, there were no crops, there was a famine. They said people were killing each other over a cup of water. That's how precious the water had gotten in that land. It was terrible. Can you imagine what the United States would look like after 3 years of a drought? There would be no food. People would be rioting and killing each other, literally, and not over wearing a mask in the grocery store. There would be no grocery store. Now, she said, we're going to dress it, make that biscuit, cook it with the 2 sticks, that we may eat it and die. Wow. Now, if Elijah did not understand commitment, he would have told that woman, okay, that's all right, I understand. You go ahead and do that, and I'll see if I can find something else in the city, and maybe we'll see if we can't find somebody to give you something. But he understood how God worked. And then when God asks the impossible, crazy things of people, he will provide the means to do those crazy things. And so Elijah said this to her, fear not. Go and do as you've said. But make me thereof a little cake first, and bring it unto me, and then after you did that, you make one for you and your son. God comes first. A lot of problems, the reason that people can't get rid of the things in their life, they claim they love the Lord, they claim they want to serve the Lord, but God comes second. The things of God come second. And like Nick was saying the other day when he was teaching, it's not about us at all, it's all about him. It's not about us. God will take care of you when you make it all about him and not about you. But that's the problem. That's why people keep coming with the same problem over and over and over. You know what? You're a Democrat. You know why I call you that? Because they think that repeating the same thing over 1,000 times will bring a different result. That's the truth. Why do you think politicians keep doing the crazy, ignorant things they're doing? They're nuts. They think they do the same thing over and over again, they'll get a different result. I know Republicans do that a lot of times too, but the Democrats are famous for it. Boy, y'all hate me for calling y'all Democrats, didn't you? Woo! I'm going out this back door right here when the service is over. All right. Shane said he's just going to cut me off. I've said enough. But you can't expect God to do anything for you and to take care of those problems when you won't commit to him. You have got to understand that it's going to be a rough road. And when you make that type of a stand, God will make you not only talk the talk, but he'll make you walk the walk where other people will see it. And if you won't do it, all of these excuses are going to keep popping up every single time. Every single time. So he told her, he said, you go make me a biscuit first. And then after you brought it to me, then you go and make for you and your son. And this is why. And this is why what you need to hear, this is what I need to hear whenever we get discouraged. For thus saith the Lord God of Israel, the barrel of meal shall not waste, neither shall the cruse of oil ever fail until the day that the Lord sends rain upon the earth. And so she went and did. This old widow committed to God. She stuck her neck out because if Elijah was wrong, she was going to die of starvation even quicker. So she went and did according to the saying of Elijah, and she and he and her house did eat many days. Actually, the translation gives the idea of a full year. And he stayed with her. She had a little room set up for him to stay at. And the barrel of meal wasted not, neither did the cruse of oil fail, according to the word of the Lord which he spoke by Elijah. What does that say? You obey God in spite of your excuses and in spite of your circumstances and in spite of the fear that's around everybody right now. And make your stand and commit to him. The good days and the bad days. And every time you go to that barrel, that flour will still be there. Every time you go to that cruise, that oil will still be there. God's resources are endless. They're endless. He doesn't need you to worry about whether you're going to be able to get this or go get that. He owns that. What God is concerned with is you. He wants you and everything you are. He'll take care of the resources. Not only that, he's not going to ask somebody that's better at doing it than you are. He's going to ask you to do with what you have for him. There might be people out there with loads of resources and loads of talent and whatever, but God may not ask them. He's going to ask you. And I'm going to show you in Luke chapter 9. In Luke chapter 9, Jesus had been speaking to the multitudes of people. There was upwards of 12 to 15,000 people that he was speaking to. And by the way, Jesus must have had a powerful voice, because back in the 1700s, when they had a lot of the great revivals, and the great speaker Whitefield used to be out there, they would have crowds of 10 to 20,000 people, and Ben Franklin was a scientist and was very interested, and he would measure the distance. He'd go to those meetings, and he said he would measure the distance that Whitefield was from the very back of the crowd, and yet the crowd could hear him, and said he'd never seen a speaker that had a booming voice like that. And Ben Franklin said he always left broke too, because he said God gripped his heart, and he put everything in the offering for Whitefield, and he said I always left broke. Jesus was speaking to a crowd of upwards of 15,000 people this day. And verse number 12, it said, and when the day began to wear away, then came the 12 and said to him, send these multitudes away, that they may go into the towns and the country round about, and they can lodge, and they can get victuals, or victuals as the hillbillies call it. That means food. For we're here in a desert place. There's nowhere to get them any food. We don't have any resources. We don't have any money. They said that they could scrape up maybe 200 pennies worth of food between all of them to feed all those people, and that would not have been enough. In one of the other Gospels it said that. Look what Jesus said. But he said to them, give ye them to eat. You do it. You do it. Here's another problem with commitment. Everybody's always saying, well, let's ask so-and-so to do it. Let's go get so-and-so to do it. He's real good at this, and blah, blah, blah. No, Jesus says, you do it. Here's what I want you to do, and I want you to do it. I don't want you to have to go get somebody else. You do it. I'm asking you, with all of your problems, with all of your shortcomings, I'm asking you. And that had to have shocked even the disciples. And they said, we have no more but 5 loaves and 2 fishes. A loaf was a biscuit. That was another description of a biscuit. It was the lunch that belonged to a little boy. The fish, they said, were not much bigger than a sardine. 5 little biscuits and 2 little tiny fish, and here's upwards of 15,000 people sitting out here in this crowd. And Jesus said, you give them, you take care of it. You handle it. We don't have it. And they said, we have no more but 5 loaves and 2 fishes, except we should go and buy meat for all of these people. For there were about 5,000 men. Read that carefully. 5,000 men. They counted the men, and the men had their wives and their children with them. At the very minimum, it was 12,000. Most likely 15 or more. And so Jesus said to his disciples, make them sit down by 50s in a company. Groups of 50, that's huge. That's a lot of people. And so God is going to show the disciples that you don't have to have much. You just give what you have. Let God have what you have, and he'll take care of stretching it. Honor God with what you have, and he will give you the resources and the abilities and the power to do all of those things. But you must be committed, and you got to be willing to not wait and say, wait till I have more, Lord. No, I'm going to give you what I have right now. I remember one time at Thomas Road many, many years ago in the 70s that the Crooked Securities and Exchange Commission of the federal government decided to try to harass Thomas Road and shut them down. It was back in the good old days when Jerry could not go to bed at night unless he had infuriated 50 states and 14 foreign countries by what he would say. I love it when he'd shake that finger in the camera because, oh, they're going to have a bomb threat 2 minutes later. I was in that church when every week the SWAT team from Lynchburg Police Department would go through there searching for a bomb that they said that was called in, and they would let the service go on, and Jerry said, anybody wants to leave can leave, but the rest of us are going to stay. And they were up there in the baptismal pool looking for the bomb. They were around all over the building because people would say, we're going to kill you. I loved it. That's why I'm like I am now. I thrill with that because that's the way God does it. Don't be afraid. Let them holler. Well, the Security and Exchange Commission came after Thomas Road. And they told them they would have to come up with so much money, and I'm not sure what all happened, but they were going to shutter the church and put it down. Shut all the ministries down. That's the way the devil works. Well, Doug Oldham was there then. I loved old Doug Oldham. And Nikki got to sing for him several times before he died. And Doug Oldham got on the stage one Sunday, and this was before Jerry came out. He would usually come out closer to time to preach. And Doug Oldham said, I'm going to ask the church and everybody watching by TV to help bail us out of this ridiculous thing that we're in. But he said, I'm not going to ask the rich people, and I'm not going to ask for you to give me 100, 1,000, or 10,000, even though some of you are out there. He said, I want everybody each week to send $1.